This is The Issue, and I am the Ghetto Man. This week's issue, Sticks and Stones. We'll be right back.
Lies! Lies! All lies! All governments lie!
All right, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. The United States Supreme Court unanimously reaffirms there is no hate speech exception to the First Amendment. We've been talking about this for quite a while now. This dealing with the communist left, the Democrats, pushing their progressive communist anti-American agenda, have been trying to do whatever they can to put a stranglehold on free speech by saying that when people say things that are offensive to other people, that these things are hate speech and that there's no room in our society for that. Well, the First Amendment was put into our Constitution. It was one of the first 10 amendments, the very first of the 10 amendments. And the most important was freedom of speech, the ability to be able to speak your mind without having to worry about anyone, especially in government, hauling you off and punishing you or prosecuting you for something that they didn't like that you said. When it comes to the First Amendment, I think it's very important that you understand that the First Amendment isn't there to protect popular speech. It's there to protect unpopular speech. When people want to express themselves, and if it's even in a heated manner, they have a right to do so without having to worry about the police hauling them away. So if there's a police officer that's doing something that a citizen doesn't like, he has every right, or her, has every right to sit there, and as long as they're not interfering with what's going on with the officer, you can yell anything you want. You can call him you dirty pig, you no good flatfoot, you baby killer, whatever you want to do. You can go ahead and do it, and they cannot arrest you or say that you are interfering with them while you're exercising your freedom of speech. In fact, there was a case that went down, and I'm going to say about 30 years ago, it has to be at least 30 years ago, called Houston versus Hill. It's the United States Supreme Court case where this guy was arrested for doing just what I just said, screaming at the police and hollering and calling them all kinds of names and cussing at them and F-bombs all over the place. He was arrested and tried and convicted of interfering with this officer. Anyway, the Supreme Court said no. If you're going to become a police officer, you have to be someone who has some thick skin. You can be very ready that you're going to have people that are going to sometimes say things to you that are just going to push you to the edge. And if you can't control yourself and handle that situation, then it's time for you to get a different job or not get that job in the first place. You have a right to say anything that you want to say, providing that what you say doesn't violate somebody's life, liberty, or property. And we have given examples of that on other shows, things like defamation, saying things about somebody that affects their reputation or their earnings or causes them some kind of emotional stress. Those aren't protected by the First Amendment. I mean, yelling fire in a theater when there's no fire is that would violate somebody's life, liberty, or property, causing a stampede. People can get hurt, and so there are certain things that are not protected under the free speech. But you're right to go around and talk on any subject you want to. The left does not have the right to say that they're going to shut you down. If they're going to shut your free speech down, they have committed a crime. They have violated the law against you. They have violated one of your most sacred, protected constitutional rights, and that is to be able to speak freely, just like I'm doing right now. I know that a lot of things that I say piss a lot of people off, and you know what? I don't care. I have a right to say it, and then they have a right to say what they want to oppose it. I've had a lot of names thrown at me, and I've been called everything you can think of, but I don't care. Anyway, let's get my glasses on here and let's see what the court said in this opinion here. I think this came out June 19th, and the court says, and these are in parentheses. It says the idea that government may restrict, and ends the parentheses. So it says the idea that the government may restrict speech expressing ideas that offend strikes at the heart of the First Amendment. Speech that demeans on the basis of race, ethnicity, gender, religion, age, disability, or any other similar ground is hateful. But the proudest boast of our free speech jurisprudence is that we protect the freedom to express, quote, the thought that we hate, unquote. This is a very, very important case. And the reason being is that with all, you hear it all the time, that's hate speech. This is hate this and hate that. There is no such thing as hate speech, not in the United States. It may be in Europe, it may be in some other socialistic or communistic country, but in the United States, there is no hate speech exception to the First Amendment. So when anybody comes along and says, I don't want you to say this or we're going to shut you down, remember, these people are openly and notoriously violating your constitutionally protected right. And that is a violation of life, liberty, or property. When they come and tell you you can't talk about something, that's definitely violating your liberty. And then when they come at you and start to beat you with sticks, that's your body is your most private of property. So they're violating your property. It's very important to understand this free speech, this ruling on free speech, because the left is going to try to use this, and there's actually a term for this. It's called color of law, under color of law. They're going to stop the hate speech because it's illegal when it is not illegal. And when somebody does something under the color of law, acting under the color of law, and violates a life, liberty, or property, or an immunity, a license, anything that's guaranteed to you by the United States Constitution, they can be held liable under Title 42, Section 1983 of the United States Codes. Okay? It's important to remember that, because this has got to stop. This leftist communist crap, it has to come to an end. And when the court reaffirms this, once again, you have the high ground. You're the one that has a high ground, not this Antifa, or whatever they call themselves, these anti-fascists that are the fascists. But anyway, the court went on to say, it says, a law found to discriminate based on a viewpoint is an egregious form of content discrimination, which is presumably unconstitutional. A law that can be directed against speech found offensive to some portion of the public can be turned against minority and dissenting views to the detriment of all. The First Amendment does not entrust that power to the government's benevolence. Instead, our reliance must be on the substantial safeguards of free and open discussion in a democratic society. Well, I disagree with the Democrat part because we're a republic, but I agree with everything else. You know, if you can't talk on a subject, and it's pretty interesting because Milo was one of them. I guess he was going to speak in Berkeley, and then Ann Coulter was going to speak at Berkeley, and these leftist, communist, anti-American, anti-constitutional, domestic enemy hate groups went over there and I mean started rioting, burning things up, beating people up, breaking windows, and everything else, so that they could stop what they determined was hate speech. They didn't like it, so you couldn't do it. Now the court has clearly reaffirmed that their actions are criminal. It's illegal for them to do that. They have absolutely no legal right under any, even an unconstitutional statute at a local level, through any statute in the United States government and the Constitution itself. They have no right to stop anybody from speaking on a subject. They can protest out there peacefully, but they can't come in here and label something a crime and make up a crime such as hate speech. It's ridiculous. It's just like, a hate crime. I've always loved that word, hate crime. When somebody commits a crime, it's a crime that we should be concerned about. What their motive was as far as hate is concerned, who cares? If they robbed you, they robbed you. And if they hated you while they did it, how does that add anything? You're still robbed. And if they beat you up, you're still beat up. And tacking on something like a hate crime is just ridiculous. And we have to stick to what it really is and not what we're trying to create here. Because they've been trying really hard to get rid of the First Amendment. They're really trying hard on that. They're one of the reasons that I call my show the Ghetto Man the Issue. See, if I use some term like constitutional law, freedom of speech, or I use something that was maybe considered by them to be right-winged, or anything that would oppose the New World Order's communist agenda, they flag it and then they censor it. They make sure that people can't find it. And so we decided that we would just start with a name that would be very difficult for them to go ahead and do that in the first place. So that's why we called it the Ghetto Man, the Issue, as opposed to something that would be more apropos to a patriotic format. Anyways, let's go back to this article here for 1 second, and then I'll wrap this up. See, in this particular case, it was a band that called themselves the Slants. And I guess they were an Asian band, and the government refused to register their trademark, the Slants, and they did it on the grounds that the name might be seen as demeaning to Asian Americans. Well, whether it was demeaning or not to Asian Americans, and it doesn't matter whether these people were Asian Americans themselves, they have a right to call their band anything that they wanted to call it. And the government, especially the government, can't come in and say, well, we're worried about somebody else's feelings here. I don't know about all the music that I've heard over there. There's been a lot of stuff that has hurt my feelings. But we all know that a person has a right to express themselves and shouldn't be, have to worry about what they're saying. If they want to say it, say it. But if somebody doesn't like it, they can yell back the dirty names to you and say, you, blah, 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 whatever. But anyway, this is good news. I'm glad to see something positive come out of the court. Like I said, this is still, courts is not the final word on the matter, even though they claim they are. That this case, it really only goes to this particular case, but it also is important to know that every cases that were before this case follows everything that was before it. It just reaffirms that if you want to go ahead and hate somebody, and you have a right to, you have a right to be indiscriminate. I mean, I don't hang around people who shoot up heroin. In fact, I hate people who shoot up heroin. I hate people who are on meth. I hate them. I hate them. I won't associate them. I won't hang around them. I will shun them when I walk by because I don't like them. I have that right. And I don't care if it hurts their feelings. That's my right. But the moment I take and lay a finger on them, destroying their property, or stop them from doing anything that impairs their life, liberty, or property, that's when the law can step in. And that's the only time it can step in. So all you leftist hate groups, you communist, anti-fasc, La Raza, Black Lives Matter, KKK, Aryan Nations, all you leftist people, you can't stop people from saying what they feel. So, boo-hoo. With that said, this is the Ghetto Man, and if you're politically correct, then you're legally wrong. And if you're not part of the solution, you are the problem. Thank you for watching.
Live!